First of all, I thank Walter and the panelists and you for coming out to help us address one of the, perhaps even the deepest issue confronting the African continent at this time. As he mentioned, I wouldn't like this to be a deep lecture because I would like an engagement. And quite frankly, Dr. Morton's remarks are a segue to what I'll talk about. You hit the key points. The African University of Science and Technology, I just want to give you a brief background on that, was conceived by African heads of state, and Dr. Nelson Mandela took leadership of this, mostly because they recognized that to have Africa develop the way it should, there needs to be some investment of intellectual capital. And they look around the continent, most of the African universities don't even rank in the top 500 in the world. Southeast Asian countries didn't do it that way. So they decided to develop this African University of Science and Technology, which is a continental university. To work with international agencies, foreign agencies, the private sector, non-profit organizations, to harvest the intellect of people who have Africa interests, not just Africans, to help prop up African economies so that services to Africans and African residents would be promoted. I would like to, in this presentation, basically lead you through just a few things to help you in configuring questions and making your remarks about the nature of education in the continent. Basically, every African country now uses sustainable development as the mantra, but really not all of them will succeed in it because they don't have all the configurational things and the capital to deal with this. But to do this, educational systems in Africa have to recognize the policy context, the development context that need to be viewed. Economic development, non-investment of intellect, doesn't work too well down there. Population management, Africa has one of the highest population increase rates worldwide. Environmental and natural resources stewardship, and social equity. Most of you have read about all the problems in the Niger Delta, Darfur, and so forth. So educational systems in Africa have to be configured to address these issues. Keep going. Keep going. Yes, so the context is that Africa has to look at the fact that globalization of the economy is on, diversification in culture. Africa is perhaps the most diverse continent culturally. Information explosion, increase in competition, replacement of human labor by machines. Now, to do this in Africa, where are the MITs? Where are the California Institute of Techs? We don't have that. The best ranked African university is the University of Cape Town, and a few others, University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. The latest ranking, not a single African university ranked among the top 500 in the world. So we are taking steps to reverse this, create a framework for a lot of people from the diaspora and even indigenous Africans who live in Africa to participate in science and technology, establish collaborations across the board, and help drive African economies up so that the governments can be more stable. Of course, the governments have the role of providing goods and services for their citizenry, and that is enabled by economic development. And non-investment of intellect has been one of the major problems in African economic development plans. Basically, you have very large projects because it always comes to funding. How are you going to fund this? The GDPs of most of the countries is very low. Even then, the percentage of the GDP that they invest in capital and knowledge creation is very, very low. It's the lowest in the world. So there's got to be some supplement to their capacity to do this. And some of us are arguing that for very large-scale projects, African governments should place a requirement that at least 10% of the project budget should be devoted to support of educational initiatives, and also that when you have such large projects of constructing a dam, this could be $200 million. Why can't $2 million be used to engage a local university to work on the projects, supply technicians, and study the projects, not just for helping those schools, but for the issue of sustainability? What happens? Who sustains the projects? About 15 years ago now, I did a continent-wide review of projects funded by the World Bank. I went to every of the 29 African countries. So that was one of the major problems. The projects could not be sustained. There are still large projects that have been abandoned because there was no sustainability plan. And one of the key factors of those have been lack of technical expertise and engagement of those who would have helped do that. Now, of course, this country, as you know, was built on the harvesting of the intellect of Americans, some of them immigrants who came. There's no such system in Africa. Even with advancement in knowledge, you often do not have mechanisms for engagement of that knowledge in governance systems, in private sector development things, be there at the federal, state, or local levels. In this country, you are perhaps aware of the how agriculture was developed, a number of land grant institutions, some of which I attended and some of which I taught at. The Iowa State University, Oklahoma State University, Michigan State University. They have very strong extension programs. As a matter of fact, University of Michigan even took this overseas. There are several alliances that they have with universities in Asia. Even Nigeria's premier university, the University of Nigeria in Nsukka, was in 1962 developed by Michigan State University. But you don't have such things anymore. I bet in the 60s, towards the end of the 1960s, what happened is that military governments took over and then drove off a lot of the missions that were responsible for doing this and broke alliances with foreign universities. Now, of course, there is a renaissance. Africa needs to sit up. The era of independence struggles are over. This is the era of African Renaissance. And I hope that you all will engage with us. I have a lot more information for you, but as I had promised earlier, I don't want to take up all your time, but as we discuss, I will bring out some of the issues and some of the things that we've done to try to address them. I see some people who've been engaged in that process, even in the audience. Primary among them is Dr. Bassi, sitting there, who is the Director General of the Directorate for Technical Help across Africa. And we are hoping to build alliances with you and your organizations to improve educational support systems in Africa. I thank you very much for the opportunity to chat.